Good evening. Shalom. My name is Ellen Renee Adams. I'm the president of the Jewish Community Federation of Richmond. The last 10 days has been a roller coaster of emotion. And like so many of you, my heart is aching. Every rocket fired, an innocent life lost, both Israeli and Arab, hurts me to my core. The relentless rocket attacks from terrorist groups in the Gaza Strip has caused millions of adults and children to live in fear and race for shelter every time the sirens are sounded. Today, we say Hineni. We gather in solidarity with the people of Israel, recognizing that we are one Jewish community. Regardless of distance, we are one family. Am Yisrael Chai. Israel is my happy place. It's my Disney World. And the last time I was there was 2 years ago celebrating Yom HaAtzmaut. And my heart is breaking for what is going on right now. And I personally cannot, I pray for peace, for things to calm down, and for us to be able to all go back and celebrate with our brothers and sisters in Israel. I am grateful to our partners who have joined us in making this program happen. Richmond is a special place, and we are grateful for each of you and the critical role that you play in our Jewish world. I would like to specifically thank the Embassy of Israel, the JDC, and the Jewish Agency for the work over these past 10 days, supporting those most impacted in Israel, and for their ongoing partnership. Tonight, we will hear from our friend, Deputy Chief of Mission at the Embassy of Israel to the US, Benjamin Krasna, Chair of the Board of the Jewish Agency, Michael Siegel, who will be joined by Ophir Yassir, who is a Shinchin, a young emissary in Baltimore, who grew up just a mile from Gaza in Sderot. First, however, it is my honor to introduce my friend, my mentor, and Richmonder, Mark Sisiski, who is the president of the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, the largest Jewish relief agency in the world. Mark will be joined by an extended member of our Richmond family, live from Israel, Robinovich. Thank you, Mark.
It's nice to be back in Richmond. Thank you very much for having me. And I want to also take this moment to thank Michael Siegel for making a return. Am I being heard?
Yes.
Yeah. I'd like to thank Michael Siegel, the chairman of Jaffe, for making a return trip to Richmond and being with us tonight. And Michael, although I'm not very political, please give Bougie my best regards. Yesterday, I spent all day on the phone and Zoom in talking to people in Israel, all of our different divisions of JDC, which are deeply involved in crisis management for the most vulnerable members of Israeli society. I also talked to the mayor of Lud, and for those of you that are old enough, they know Lud used to be where the airport before it became Ben Gurion, but Lud is a mixed city, and there are mixed cities in Israel, and we have in very important relations in those cities working with the Arab Israeli community. The mayor, who was basically crying when he talked to me, said, for God's sakes, our trust is broken. And this has been a terrible situation in all of these Arab, Israeli, and Jewish communities where everyone has lived together in peace for a long time. I spoke to the leader in Haifa, who said Haifa was once a normal city. So there is chaos now in those places, and I don't want to dwell on it, but I just wanted to mention it because it is part of JDC's work to work with the Arab Israeli community and the Arab Muslim Jewish community, because there's 1.9 million Arab citizens in Israel, and they do pose an existential threat to the state of Israel. We've always realized that, the government's always realized that, and we work to take away that, to give opportunity to the Arab community in Israel. They are the most vulnerable members of Israeli society, along with the elder Israelis who are just tremendously traumatized by what's happened. First, they had to deal with COVID, and now in their last years of life, dealing with bombs and sirens and missiles. It's been a very, very tough time, and we're working with them. I want to be conscious of the time because there's a number of speakers. You know, our sweet spot at JDC, we like to think of as our medium and long-term planning process for the government of Israel and also for the citizens of Israel. Many of the programs that are being done during these days, these past number of days, were programs we developed after the last 7 years ago, the war with Gaza and the problems of rockets coming into Israel. And we were ready with these programs and ready to use them. We're here also to bring emotional support to students, young people, educators, kindergarten teachers, you name it, and we're doing those type of strategies on your behalf. This is worn out. I believe many in the Jewish community that are vulnerable, those that are disabled. We have a very large presence in the disabled community. All of this now is being done online. We've had practice with it for many years, 2 years with COVID, and it's been quite successful. We have problems in the workplace in our division of Tevet because of issues involving Arab and Jewish workers side by side, and there's problems with that. We have problems with communities that we work with, especially in Jerusalem. We work through our division of Elka, which is working in municipalities and working with community leaders around the state. I could go on and on, but I won't. I'd rather you hear from my niece, Robinovich. Reut is my oldest niece, and Reut will remind me, I have I have 4 nieces and many great nephews and great nieces that I love very much. So I'm going to turn the program over to Reut, and she's going to talk about some of the issues that she's faced as a young mother living in Ramat Gan and professional. Reut?
Good evening. I'm Reut. I live in Ramat Gan, which is in the center of Israel. It's part of like the Tel Aviv metropolitan and like in the center of Israel. I have 3 children. I have a 6.5-year-old, an 8.5-year-old, and a 10-year-old. And I'll try just to let you understand what I've been through and my children have been through in the past couple of days. And the way I see it is this was worse than COVID. I'll explain. I believe in science, and science has won COVID. And what we've been dealing with the past 10 days is terrorist organization, which you don't really know what to expect from. And that's why over a week we haven't left our house. And when I mean we haven't left our house, I didn't go to the grocery store. I didn't go downstairs. I didn't go visit any of my friends. I literally haven't left my house for the past 10 days. I've been sleeping with my children in the safe room, mattresses on the floor. And I'm actually one of the lucky ones who has a safe room in my house, so I have where to go. And I'll mention that I also have 90 seconds to get to my safe room, which is plenty, especially considering the people in the Gaza Strip, around the Gaza Strip. They only have 15 seconds once they hear the alert to get to a safe place. So we're lucky, even considering Ramat Gan, because in my neighborhood, most of the houses around me don't have a safety room, and then they have to go out to the stairways, and that's not always enough. Last week, there was he was sitting in a wheelchair, and he didn't have a safety room to go to, and he got hit not by the missiles, but just by the debris around. And unfortunately, that was enough to take his life. As well as the Ramat Gan Zoo got hit by some debris, and there was a monkey who had to go into surgery. So it's not just humans who are suffering. Monkey actually got hit by debris in the rockets that we've been getting the past 10 days. So that was very unfortunate. And while that rocket fell, we heard everything. We heard it from the safe room. We heard the bombs, like we heard it explode. And we stayed in for 10 minutes. And when we left our safe room to go outside, we heard all the ambulances around. We went outside and we saw all the smoke right by our house, like maybe half a kilometer away. And I mean, we knew something bad has happened right around in our safe neighborhood, what we thought of as our safe neighborhood. I'm very excited. So I always saw in myself as a strong person and went through a lot of stuff in life. And this past week, something has cracked, and I felt fear. And if during COVID, they told us we can send our kids to school because it's safe. So I believed, and I send my kids to school like very calmly. Now I don't know what I feel about it. I mean, I'll be very, very nervous to send my kids back to school because I wouldn't know what to expect. And I mean, this is Hamas we're talking about. The last thing I would like to say is the children. They've been through such a rough year, and they finally got back to meeting each other, and their conversations include shelters and bombings and alerts. And they went back to school on Zoom, which, I mean, they've had such a rough year, and now it's all gone back. I'm a teacher I'm not a teacher, I'm an assistant teacher in the special education. And even they haven't got back to school, and that's very unusual. Like they always study, no matter what. If there's very rough weather or during the whole time in COVID, they went to school. So, and now they're not going to school. So, you know, this is something different, like something has changed. My father, my parents, they live up north, and they offered to come over and get away. But even going up north, I was terrified because I didn't know what to expect from Lebanon. And unfortunately, I was right, because the other day, I have a lot of family up north, and my sisters heard all the missiles and rockets that came from Lebanon. And my parents up north don't have where to go if they're getting bombed. So staying at my house is the best solution, and I feel safe in my house. But still, it's very terrifying, and I guess I'm lucky because I have a safe room and I have 90 seconds to get there. I can't even imagine what the people up south, down south, have been going through. So I would like to say thank you for listening, and thank you for recognizing us at these hard times. And I hope for better days. Have a good. I'm gonna go to sleep now because it's very late. Thank you for listening.
Toda rabah, Laila tov, Reut. Thank you very
Laila
much.
tov.
Thank you very much for being with us, and I'll turn the program over to our next guest.
Thank you, Reut, for sharing your personal story. I can't even imagine having 90 seconds to protect my children from incoming rockets. Haisha, Shev, and beautiful baby Tair Schatzman. Uri, Nama, Shani, Oded, and Omri Rosenheck. My dear nephew, niece, and adorable great niece, my cousins. Good evening, Richmond. Like many of you, I could fill many more slides with second and third cousins, and I know many, if not most of you with us tonight could also fill slideshow upon slideshow of your family and friends who are in Israel, also running for shelters. But really, all of our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael is our family. My name is Amy Melnick-Scharf, and I chair the Jewish Community Relations Committee at the Jewish Federation of Richmond. I want to thank you for being with us and for listening today. As you can tell, this is personal. It's personal for all of us. How many of you, like me, are waking up each morning these past 10 days, and the first thing you do is you check your phone? Is my family in Israel all right? Is Haisha and Shev and Tair, are they together? Are they safe? Our hearts are breaking at the violence of the last week and the tragic loss of innocent life, wherever they are. I know many are struggling with how best to show their support for Israel. These are complex issues filled with layers and history. Our love of Israel means that we engage, we express, we show our pride, and yes, we can be distraught at some of the politics and policies that don't sit right with us. That is okay. That is honesty. That's democracy. That is our community. What is not okay? It is not okay to question Israel's right to exist. It is not okay to deny Israel's right to defend itself and her citizens. And it is not okay to lie about what is actually happening there on the ground. Make no mistake, the drumbeat of misinformation, hashtags, buzzwords against Israel are growing. These are going to be difficult words that I'm about to share with you, but if you've been on the non-Jewish social media sites, you will hear Israel is committing apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and yes, even genocide. These are disgusting and false narratives that have become the new mantra. And these false narratives, hashtags and infographics and buzzwords are repeated and repeated. They're shared, they're liked and commented. And they're not just fringe elements and believers any longer. As a communications or any media consultant will tell you, and what we have learned over these past several years, the more you repeat something, the more the public will begin to believe it. So it is our job now to raise our voice and let our elected officials know we support Israel's right to defend and protect its citizens, Israel's right to live in peace, free from rocket attacks, and yes, even Israel's basic right to exist. Now, am I saying you have to support every single government policy as it pertains to the Palestinians, or even the Israeli government's policy, even the Israeli government itself and the political parties in charge? I am not. Am I asking you to strongly advocate for Israel's basic need and right to exist? Yes, I am. We must be this counterpoint, reminding our local delegation to support Israel. Your voice matters for our elected officials here in Virginia. They need to hear from us consistently, clearly, and often. Although some may want to try and influence Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Ilhan Omar, we don't vote in New York or Minnesota. We vote here, right here in Virginia. Doesn't have to be complicated, and it's not. Our JCRC has provided email templates and alerts where you can add your voice to this effort. You can also join our partners at AIPAC in making your voice heard. You simply text Israel to the number 73075. That's the number 73075, the word Israel. And the text template will come up to walk you through that process. Senator Warner, Congresswoman Spanberger, and Congressman McEachin have already made public statements supporting Israel on Twitter. We must thank them. The JCRC and many in our community individually have worked over these past several years to build very strong relationships with these leaders, and we are pleased to see their public support for Israel. The texting information is in your chat. Speaking of our community, Federation has also reached out to the Richmond Times-Dispatch, the RTD, and has requested a convening to discuss the recent disturbing editorial and recent coverage of local events. We will be tenacious with the RTD. We believe in a free press. Everyone is entitled to their opinion. They are not entitled to their own facts. There is such strong pressure right now for Congress and for the Biden administration to change its long-standing and necessary bipartisan support of Israel. Members of Congress and the Biden administration will continue to make statements in the short term, but this has long-term consequences. Our elected officials need to know their constituents support Israel's right to defend itself from a terrorist organization. Again, the text information is in the chat. If you have personal relationships with any of the local congressional delegation, now is the time to reach out and try to connect with them directly. Senator Kaine and Congressman Scott from the Williamsburg area and Congressman Good from Charlottesville, if we have people attending from those communities, have stayed silent so far. So if you, again, have a personal relationship, now is the time to reach out. As an aside, Congresswoman Luria from Virginia Beach is one of the House leaders leading the charge to support Israel in multiple ways on the House floor, in statements, in meetings, etc. Never have I seen this level of hatred, vitriol, and outright misinformation and lies about what is actually happening in Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank. Never have I seen this level of outright demonization, delegitimization, and outright anti-Semitism directed at not just Israel, but all of us as Jews. And again, I'm not saying we cannot criticize the policies of Israel. We can criticize the policies of any government, but that is not what's happening right now. Never have I been so scared for my nephew, Haisha, my niece Shev, baby Tayyir, and the Rosenhecks. Never have I been so scared for Israel. We can do so little alone, but together we can do so much. If not for me and you, but for them and all of our families in Israel, let's do this together. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Benjamin Krasna, the Deputy Chief of Mission, for being with us with our community and for your ongoing partnership. Welcome to Richmond.
Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for inviting me here this evening to be with you as you showing your support for Israel and for our citizens really at this very, very challenging time. Of course, it would have been nicer and better. When I heard Amy's opening comment a bit about last week when 8 in the evening here, we were sharing WhatsApp messages with my two brothers and their kids in Israel, with my son who's in Israel. And they're showing us pictures and everything else. And it was really, really quite lovely to be able to do that. Except the realization was that it was 3 a.m. in Israel, and they were all awake because they had just had to move to secure and safe rooms. And so really, it was actually quite surrealistic. I want to say that again, I think that over the last almost 2 weeks, 11 days here, we first and foremost want to thank everyone for their support, for their concern, for their involvement and activity, and which I totally wholeheartedly agree with Amy is an ongoing challenge to have the engagement, to be engaged with your political leaders and your opinion makers and your media. And let me express, of course, that we at the embassy are more than welcome, more than happy to be your partners, to be involved, to be there, to come down if need be, to meet with people. And so again, that offer always stands. I also want to say, and again, we are all in anticipation that hopefully tonight will be the end of this round. I don't think it's really in Israel. It was, and when we think about it, we know, unfortunately, that there's almost eventually going to be another round, and whether it's 8 years or 4 years or 6 years, we know that unfortunately sometimes these things will need to be done, and really at a tremendous cost in human life, a tremendous cost in resources, a tremendous cost in damage, a tremendous cost that was raised, I heard Reut earlier, psychologically to parents and to children and to citizens to have to deal with this. But again, this is the evening where we're looking forward to a quiet Shabbat after we did not enjoy a quiet Shavuot. I want to assure you from here, from Washington, from the embassy, and I've been consistently engaged with the administration, and I was late joining this call because of the need to maintain those contacts. We're very appreciative of the support that we received from President Biden and from the administration. That really is key to allowing us to achieve what the goals are here in terms of returning the quiet, in terms of restoring the deterrence, in terms of destroying Hamas infrastructure and their leadership, and making sure that there's no doubt that Israel will do everything it can to defend its people. I think that we enjoyed here a great deal of support and understanding that what we're dealing with was an act of self-defense against a terrorist organization. We know that there are people who try to portray it differently. We understand the criticism sometimes. Much of it is unwarranted or comes from a ignorance or even, I would say, a predisposed position on issues. And those are things that we have to combat and call out, particularly where they're not sharing the truth of what it is for democracy to fight against a terrorist organization, of what it is to be woken up every night at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. We're going to sleep not knowing that you're going to wake up. What if you're going to wake up or not have to move? I recall a conversation with my son, who's a soldier, who's in Israel, unfortunately, or in part, and I haven't seen him much this year because of COVID. But telling him, listen, go and sleep in your safe room tonight. I said, that way you don't have to worry whether you do or don't wake up from a siren. So again, I think that we have that understanding. I think we have seen that as well. I don't want to say without challenges, but in a bipartisan fashion here. And I would say that in our conversations with the administration, we've had strong support for the need to act in self-defense. I think that people have to make no mistake about it. A lot can be written about what were the various circumstances that led to this and what was the convergence of different events that were going on. At the end of the day, this was a premeditated action by Hamas, dictated by its desire to improve its standing in the Palestinian street, Palestinian politics, frustrated by Abu Mazen's decision to postpone an election, which they had hoped would be a harbinger of them being able to become more powerful in the West Bank. A frustration, a desire then to put themselves on the map in the Palestinian community, in their own minds, is using as the pretext of being the protector of Jerusalem. And so when they launched those attacks on Jerusalem Day, at our capital city, at Jerusalem, it's very, very, very clear. They knew very well what our response was going to be. They knew that there wasn't a situation where this was going to go without a response, and that the response was quite severe. And that probably is something that they took into consideration, but we had no choice in those acts but to act in self-defense. So again, I think that after 11 days, and we will save the summaries, that hopefully in 3 hours, 2 hours, we'll know if calm has been restored. Hopefully, it will have been restored. We leave the terrorist organization looking at wounds with tremendous damage, tremendous destruction to their infrastructure, to their leadership, tremendous frustration at their inability to protect themselves and our capabilities. We walk out with our heads held high. I'm proud of all the cooperation, including with here in the United States, at the tremendous achievements of Iron Dome and intercepting over 90% of missiles that could have hit the cities of Israel. And we recognize the tragedy and the more the losses of the Israelis who were killed in this operation, and the damage that was done psychologically, physically, structurally. We regret the loss of all civilian lives. But again, when you're fighting a war against a terrorist organization who has no problem committing dual war crimes, targeting rockets at your civilians, and at the same time using their own civilians as protective cover, their own hospitals as protective cover, their own schools as protective cover, and therefore, unfortunately, you end up with a regrettable loss of innocent human lives. So again, in cognizant of the time, I want to again express my thanks for your support, our commitment to continue to work with you in every way we can to build stronger ties and share with you really all of our hope for a peaceful, quiet weekend and for the days coming. Thank you.
I'm Michael Siegel. I'm the chairman of the Jewish Agency for Israel. I am your substitute teacher for this particular event. You were scheduled to have the chairman of the executive of the Jewish Agency, Isaac Herzog, who is clearly more dynamic than I am, to address you about the ongoing enterprise of the Jewish Agency during the last couple of days. As you may be aware, Isaac Herzog has declared himself as a candidate for the presidency, which will be a vote on June 2nd by the legislature, the Knesset, who will do a secret ballot to pick the next president of the country after Ruby Rivlin. Mr. Herzog is now on a leave of absence for the Jewish Agency, and while I chair the board of trustees and have worked very closely with Mr. Herzog over the last couple of years, we certainly wish him luck in the next phase of his life in public service for the state of Israel and for the Jewish people. And therefore, you can hear from him after the election. It's also ironic that later in the program, you're going to be saying the prayer for the state of Israel, which I hope you are aware that it is his grandfather, Isaac Herzog, the first Ashkenazi rabbi of the state of Israel, who actually wrote that prayer. So Mr. Herzog has a long history, along with his father being president of the country and his uncle Abba Eben, who was his mother's brother. You can understand the whole connection of Isaac Herzog to not only the state of Israel, his commitment to the state, but also to Free State Israel. So we wish him the best of luck in his new election. In that regards, let me talk a little bit about the Jewish Agency. Today, as you are aware, we stand on three pillars: Aliyah, bettering the Israel society, and the connecting of Jews worldwide to each other and to Israel. All of them have been impacted by the war that has gone on in the South. I just want to say particularly how you could see the trauma that Reut was feeling by being with her family in a safe house. That hasn't been the case for the employees of the Jewish Agency. We have 7,000 people in Israel living in absorption centers. Over 4,000 of them are in the south of Israel. Our employees every day are going down into their various assignments to make sure that relatively new people, including literally 2,000 Ethiopians that have been brought in the last year, some of them in the last month, who have no idea of what it's like to be living in a war zone. So our employees have been as traumatized as Reut, and yet they get up every day with the resiliency to do their jobs for the betterment of the Israeli society. And it is because of what you do in Richmond, Virginia, that allows them to be capable of meeting the mission of the Jewish Agency. We have in senior citizen homes that we operate, we have almost 8,000 people. Again, it is the employees of Israel, the Jewish Agency for Israel, in terms of its program Amigor, that is doing that. You have two programs which you have been enormously supportive of, one which is the P2G that you have with Hedera. I'm going to talk about that in a second, and also what you have been doing by supporting Shinshinim and Shlichut in your community. And we're about to hear from Ofer Yasur, who comes from the South, and he'll talk to you what it means to be, to be on a program in the United States away from your family when all of this trauma is going on. And so what I would say is, we had while we're very excited about the news of a potential ceasefire that's going to happen in the next hour and a half, that's great if it actually occurs, but it's not so good for the people that had issues today. In fact, one of the P2G directors, the P2G director in Ashkelon, which is the sister city of Baltimore, Maryland, took a direct hit on her home today. They were in a safe room, but there was an injury to her son, and we're waiting to hear what that's all about. So while we're all kind of pleased about the progress towards a ceasefire, we still have to remember not only do the Israelis have to be resilient, but there is certainly a great deal of aftermath that we're going to have to deal with the society. We connect Jews with the Shlichim, Shinim programs. We are on college campuses. It is our young people, which you're about to hear from, who are organizing activities for the anti-BDS and the pro-Israel activity. There is so much anti-Semitism going on right now. It is probably worse on college campuses. There's not a lot of news coming out on the college campuses because it's in the streets, but there's still tremendous pressure on our kids that are on college campuses. And we should be very thankful for you, the people of Richmond, Indiana, that have been so generous to your Overseas in Israel agenda for so many years. I want to thank Mark Sasiski and the community for their ongoing commitment to the Jewish people, to the Jewish Agency, to the Joint, to ORT, and to the programs that keep us connected. And while, yes, it may be okay to not agree with every policy, but at periods of time like now, there should be no distance between the Jewish community of the world and its people of Israel. We are here because of the strength and the resilience of the people of Israel. It's not about politics when people are firing rockets at you. It's not disproportionate when people are firing rockets indiscriminately into civilian territories. The fact of the matter is our Victims of Terror Fund distributes immediate cash to those families and businesses that have been destroyed by these rockets. So one of the things that the Jewish Agency does, it delivers immediate cash checks. Right now, we've delivered it to almost 200 families. We have many more to deliver as we're able to do that, but none of that is accomplished without your ongoing commitment as a community to support the overseas agenda and to support the people of Israel. So I could go on. You have a great program here to talk about all the emotional aspects that we're all feeling about what's going on in Israel right now. I think you're about to be very inspired by a young Shinshinim, I believe, who comes from Sderot, Ofer Yasor. Ofer will, I'm sure, give you something you haven't heard from the other speakers. So Ofer, thank you for being with us, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Hi, everyone. So as I was introduced, my name is Ophir. I'm currently in the Jewish community in Baltimore as part of my gap year through the Jewish Agency and the Federation of Baltimore. I live in Sderot in Israel, which is known to be a city only a mile away from Gaza. And that means that a part of my reality, like that of many other citizens of Israel who live so close to Gaza, is to experience threats such as rockets that are being fired at us, bombs and kites that are being sent to set fires all around our areas, and tunnels that are being dug under us to allow terrorists to invade our places of living. This reality has been ongoing for more than 20 years now, with an incident every once in a while, and every now and then an operation as big as this one. Between the IDF and Hamas, and our area of living becomes a living hell with hundreds of rockets fired at us every day, which prevents us from going out of our shelters and live our life normally and without stress, anxiety, and fear for ourselves and our loved ones. Every time an alarm sounds all around us, and we know that we have only 15 seconds, sometimes less, to get to a shelter. Luckily, every house has a bomb shelter, and there are more bomb shelters out in the streets than there are McDonald's around the United States. I was born into this reality and lived my entire life like that, and I know that many people in my environment are having extremely hard times and suffer from the consequences of this reality. But it is times like this that I notice all the good things that are happening. Families from all around Israel are offering to host people from my area for until things calm down, like my family was hosted during this current operation, without the need to worry about their safety. And it's times like this where you see that so many rockets are being fired at us, over 4,000 already during this operation, and yet the number of casualties is so low that remind me of how much people from all around the world wish to help me, my friends, and my family. One of the reasons that Sderot managed to get so many bomb shelters and build so many iron dome facilities to protect everyone in my city was all the donations that Israel and my city have received from Jewish communities and people from all around the world. And there's nothing that made me happier during this hard time in my country, being far away from it when it's in a state like this, than seeing all the support and love of the Jewish people in the Jewish communities through social media, through personal conversations that I had, and protests that support Israel that I see all around me. I'm so happy for the opportunity to thank you all here personally, and really thank you.
Hi, thank you, Ophir. I'm Orly Lewis. I'm the CEO of the Carol and Marcus Weinstein Jewish Community Center. And I'm also the daughter of North African parents who immigrated to Israel from Tunisia after World War II. I was raised in Beersheba in the southern desert region of the country and lived in Israel until my early 20s and after my military service, when I married an American and moved to the United States. Like most Israelis, I arrived in the USA not planning to stay very long, but ended up building a beautiful life here in Richmond, Virginia. I'm extremely proud to be an Israeli and an American, and I feel a deep connection to both countries and to both my Israelis and Richmond Jewish communities. It means so much to me as an individual and as a Jewish community professional that we have all gathered here this evening in support of Israel and of each other. My sister lives in Israel and I speak to her regularly. When I shared with her that our local federation has organized this event, she said, Kol hakavod, which means well done or congratulations. Her way of acknowledging the importance of us being connected together despite our physical distance. I believe Israelis long for our support and our connection, regardless of how far away we are from each other. And that is what we are here tonight to express. In Hebrew, we say, Am echad belev echad, one people, one heart. The bond between people of Israel and this Jewish community is unbreakable and strong. We know that Israel is not just a home for Israelis, but a safe haven for all Jews around the world. In these challenging times, we extend our hands and our hearts to one another and stand in unwavering support of the state and the people of Israel. Working at the Weinstein JCC, the Center of Engagement for Jewish Life in Richmond, I am so proud to be part of a place where all people are welcomed, accepted, respected, and celebrated. We have a long history of coexistence, and it should be a model for how our rest of the world should look like. In my war diary in 1973, as a teenager in the Yom Kippur War, I write on October 7th, "Today is the first day of the war. We got some supplies, food and water, covered our windows, and all I'm hoping for is for the war to be over in peace and for everyone to be safe." Thank you, Daniel, Ellen, Renee, and the entire Federation staff for creating this opportunity for our community to come together, to learn from each other and to support each other and the people of Israel. Tonight, an ocean away and nearly 50 years later, I repeat my youthful prayer and pray for peace and safety for all. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rabbi Hal Shevitz of Congregation Or Atid. It's an honor to be with you this afternoon and to share a few words. First off, Orly, thank you for sharing your family connections to the state of Israel and your leadership in our community. The medieval Jewish poet and philosopher Yehuda Halevi wrote, "My heart is in the east and I am at the ends of the west." We are in distress, sitting so far away, merely watching and hearing of the trauma that Israelis experience, running and hiding in bomb shelters in the face of a relentless barrage of rockets that has killed and injured Jews, Arabs, and foreigners in Israel. We are in distress about the deaths of innocent Palestinians who live under the repressive rule of Hamas and have become victims of Israel's efforts to prevent more rockets from being launched and weaken the terrorist organization. It also pains us to see the rioting and destruction in many of Israel's cities and the beating and killing of Jews and Arabs stirred up by Jewish and Arab extremists. We know that building a thriving Jewish state in our ancestral homeland is not an easy task, and this flare-up is proving to be an especially challenging and painful one. We pray for calm to be restored and justice to be brought to those who wish to create terror. There's a fierce battle being waged in Israel, and I also fear the rise of another fierce battle on this side of the world. Just this morning, I spoke with my sister-in-law, who lived in Richmond for 7 years before making Aliyah last November. Over the last few days, even as Israel has been under assault, she has been involved in life-affirming activities, planning her upcoming wedding and attending a Brit Milah of her newborn cousin. Something about our conversation this morning surprised me. She was more concerned about our safety than her own. Like all of us, she is horrified by the hateful rhetoric about this conflict as we are starting to see it transform into hateful actions. While the battle in Israel and Gaza is about many things, the battle here is for hearts and minds. And no matter where you live or what the situation is, speaking hate is not a way to promote peace. There are many things about Israel that are complex, and they must not be reduced to vitriolic sound bites and slogans. I ask that we pray for the wisdom, knowledge, and discernment to see the complexities that can and must coexist in the world. I also ask that we pray for the courage to see moral clarity when necessary, to recognize right and wrong, and to act accordingly. The ancient psalmist spoke, Adonai oz la'amo yiten, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. Adonai, may you grant strength to your people and may you bless your people with peace. Amen. I now turn the program over to Dani Plotnick, a 7th grader at Brudland Torah Academy, Richmond's Jewish day school.
Now I'm going to say a prayer for the state of Israel. Avinu Shabashamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Goalo, Baruch es Medinas Yisrael, Rashis Smichas Gulasenu. Our Father in heaven, Rock and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, the initial sprouting of our redemption. Chazik es yadei megine aret kadshenu, v'hanchilem Elokeinu Yeshua, v'ateretz nitachon ta'atrin nasat shalom ba'aretz, v'simchas olam lioshveha. Strengthen the defenders of our holy land. God, grant them salvation and crown them with victory. Establish peace in the land and everlasting joy for its inhabitants. Be'es achinu kol beis Yisrael, v'kad na b'chol artzos pezureihem, v'solichem mehera kamemiyus l'tzion yirecha, v'lirushalayim mishkan shemecha. Remember our brethren, the whole house of Israel, and in all the lands of their dispersion. Speedily bring them to Zion, your city, and to Yerushalayim, sanctuary of your name. V'yachei lebavenu liyava liyureh shemecha, v'lishmor es kol divrei torasecha, u'shlach lanu mehira ben David Mashiach tzedkecha, liftos mechake ke teshuasecha. Unite our hearts to love and revere your name, and to observe all the precepts of your Torah. Speedily send us your righteous Mashiach of the house of David to redeem those who wait your salvation. Hofa bahadar gaon uzecha, al kol yoshvei sevel artsecha, vayomer kol asher neshama ba'apo, Hashem Elokei Yisrael melech u'malchaso b'kol mashallah, amen selah. Shine forth in your glorious majesty over all the inhabitants of the world, and let all living things proclaim Hashem, God of Israel, is King, and his majesty reigns over all. Amen. Selah.
Johnny, thank you for leading us in that prayer, and thank you. I look forward to seeing you on the board of the Federation or RTA or the JCC very soon. Our future is in very good hands. My name is Daniel Staffenberg. I'm the CEO of the Jewish Community Federation of Richmond. I want to start by thanking all of our partners and friends who joined together at a pretty rapid pace to bring this evening together. Reut, my friend and my new friend in Israel, our hearts are with you and your beautiful family, and we pray, luckily as we're hearing, that calm will soon return. Ophir, you brought back some wonderful memories of my own Shin daughter in Israel, Coral, and I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight and to share your personal story. But more importantly, I want to encourage you and others to continue the critical work you're doing every day to build understanding, education, and love for not just the land of Israel, but the people of Israel. Additionally, I'm going to challenge you to bring back your experience and love of the American community back to Israel and back to understand that we are truly one intertwined Jewish people. To my partner and friend, Ellen Renee, and Mark, Amy, Michael, and Rabbi Shevitz, thank you so much for your leadership and words. Ambassador Krasna, it is always good to see you, and your work in DC advocating for Israel and our partnership means a great deal to us. I also want to thank our entire amazing JCFR team, especially David Cohen, for the work over the last couple of days, including a break for Shavuos in putting this together. It's never quite easy, and I'm really proud and honored to work and be with each one of you. Tonight, we heard words of caring, concern, anger, support, prayer, love, and even frustration. Tonight was about proclaiming loudly that Richmond stands in solidarity with Israel, that we see clearly what this conflict is really about, firmly supporting Israel's right to exist and its duty to defend itself. The most important obligation of any government is to protect its citizens. And there is not a nation on earth that would allow 4,000 rockets to be fired at its citizens without action. We also recognize that innocent lives have been lost and destruction exists on both sides of the conflict. However, there is no moral equivalency between terrorists attempting to kill and maim the maximum number of citizens on the one hand, and individuals being used to shield and protect weapons, terrorists, and military installations. The blood on both Israel and Gaza and the Palestinians and of the Palestinians is firmly at Hamas's feet. While I am thrilled and pleased to hear that a ceasefire is imminent, we know that our work in building and sustaining relationships and advocacy are a marathon. While the rockets will hopefully cease tonight, our work together will continue. In the coming months, days, and years, I hope you will join our effort. Join our P2G, our Partnership Together programs, learn and participate in the advocacy efforts of our JCRC, and most importantly, support our efforts to help our students on campuses across the country. Tonight was also about us as a community, about connecting, even virtually, as a community in Richmond and with our family in Israel. Those connections matter and will be what drives us forward. I pray for the well-being of Jerusalem. May those who love you be at peace. May there be well-being within your ramparts and peace in your citadels. Thank you to the close to 270 people who joined us today. We will be in touch and we will continue this work together. And thank you for saying Am Yisrael Chai. And hopefully together soon we'll be able to step on a plane and join each other in Jerusalem. Have a wonderful evening and thank you for joining us tonight.